Uh-oh. We're doing it. It's a reaction video. We're going to go over Dark Humility's tier list here, which is actually kind of my favorite part of the season. First things first. This is essentially a reaction video, so I want you to do something. If you are subscribed here, and you are not subscribed to Dark Humility's channel, I don't know what you're doing with your life, but fix it, and go give a sub. Second, make sure you put your volume somewhere around here, even if you're not going to watch this whole 6-hour video like I have. Switch your sound settings to like something you're not using, right? Like that. And put that on in the background and bump up his watch time for doing this entire video. Okay? That's how you do that. So what I've watched most of the stream yesterday, and I listened to this all day at work and have watched most of the relevant sections that I'm looking at. So I'll also probably get Wapnator on here later and kind of discuss with him. Here's my understanding of this. And I will change this if, I'm wrong or something comes out. I don't think he knows about my channel or gives a shit who I am. If he pops in and comments and says, hey, you got this wrong, I'll fix it and pin the comment, whatever. You need to, first off, not freak out with the grading scale. Do not freak out because something says C or D. Everything on here, I think, except really for an F plus, is like viable. Okay? C builds are still crushing. He says this in the stream multiple times. And because it weeds out all the idiots on the channel, and we're 400 subs over where I was going to suicide this, we're going to do geopolitics analogy to sort of explain this. So in one of the last videos I did on geopolitics, people accused me of quoting Peter Zeihan. Close. It was What If Alt Hist, who gave me some book recommendations that obviously Zeihan has also read too. Power realists are all the same, guys. We kind of have the same ideas about things. So, Mr. Peter Zeihan, who if you guys aren't into the geopolitics world, has become a big YouTube sensation. He was kind of a smaller, lesser-known guy. He wrote a book basically to bump up his company, which was a geopolitics and consulting company. You got to have a book or no one's going to come to you. And he makes some really, really bold claims and is a very good speaker. So now he has this massive, massive YouTube presence and gives his opinion on kind of everything. Well, one of the things I want to explore, because I do agree with him on this, is he focuses largely on demographics. And that's why I like him, because I have always focused on that too. One of the claims that he makes is that China, among other countries, is essentially done for. Their demographics, their old people at the top of their pyramid, population pyramid, is so heavy. They're out of young people. They're out of 30 and 40-year-olds to pay for the old people. That is going to collapse. That's the best way to collapse any society, and specifically the Russians, the Germans, and the Chinese are headed for this cliff. And he also has, there's more to it than that. China's real estate economy is way oversaturated. They built way too much real estate, and there's no one to buy it, so they're going into a deflationary spiral on that. They have central state planning for their government, which, again, doesn't do really well for economics. And most of their military is a territorial, sea-based army that doesn't have any sort of long-range projection for protecting world trade, which is going away. And they can't keep it up. Only the Americans can keep it up, which is sort of why we're deglobalizing, because it's like, who are we protecting? China. This is stupid. But with all these claims he's been making these claims for like 15 or 20 years. I think like his first book on this came out like in 2005, and I got it in high school. So what are we talking about? Like, is he correct? Is China going to collapse? Well, I'll send you to another YouTube channel. It's Jory Shashfort. I can't remember. He's a doctor of economics, I think at like Leipzig or something. But he does have his own little YouTube channel. It's like 300K. But he is approaching things from the more academic side. And most of the academic research I see, Worldwide Poli-Sci Abstracts, go subscribe there, is that China's not headed for a complete societal collapse like he says. It's more like Japan. We literally have another Asian country that has the same problems as China. They had a flooded real estate market, a declining and an aging population, completely reliant on food imports to keep their country going, and reliant on a world trade system that, at least when they went into their spiral in the 90s, wasn't going away, but started to collapse because the Soviet Union collapsed and America didn't really know what it was going to do. Well, what happened to Japan? They didn't completely collapse. They still have a lot of state central planning. They were able to adjust pretty quickly. That is one thing state planning with your finances does. It allows you to adjust quicker than a free market style economy. And they just went into a horrible deflationary spiral for like 30 years. Yeah, what's happening with China is not good. Something bad is going to happen to them. But who's right? Is Zihan right? They're going to completely collapse societally. Or is Josh Fort and, say, the academics right, where it's more of a deflationary spiral? Probably both. We don't know. This is what you're doing. You're making a guess based off the available data in front of you. And in terms of tier lists, we all kind of got our pitchforks out a couple years ago because there was a couple tier lists that were not good. They were being tested way too fast and just on cow maps. Hang on. Sorry, where was I? And we took out our pitchforks and attacked tier lists in general. I'll tell you why I think this one is... DHs were always the best, in my opinion, and this one is the best version of that. So I'm just going to go over kind of, now that I've rambled for 8 minutes, some things to help you maybe read and navigate this. And like I said, please go to his channel. Please subscribe. Please go watch his video. Put it on for the 6 hours. And while you're at it, go sub to Wheat Solo and Bubbles and Kordesh and Sven, who I think I saw had some cool stuff going out there, and Chug That Estes, even though he's not around. I hear if he hits more subs than me, even when he's not around, he might come back like Jesus. That'd be cool, right? I may have made that up on the spot, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, couple things here, now that we're actually doing the video. Budget. What does budget mean? Well, when I'm seeing him talk about budget on the streams, budget to me sounds more like, are you able to run this with gear from Charcy? Right? That's why Summons On has triple budget. That's why Corpse Explosion has triple budget. When I say budget, and this is why I disagree with the budget rankings in general, this is what I'm talking about with Zihan versus Shashfort. It's not that this is wrong, he just has a different definition of budget. My definition of budget is, can I start this class into mapping with like my first high rune or two worth of value? Which is why, here's an example of why I do agree with this list, but disagree with the budget. He doesn't have Blade Dance, and that is my number one, like, that is budget in terms of physical builds, because it's one high rune to get it started. You can basically wear any gear, you can wear like Disciples or Nats and get your Whirlwind Claw for one high rune, and not just get into tier 1 and tier 2 maps, but start shredding them. Meanwhile, he's got budget listed as, hey, can I run it with almost nothing on it? So, navigate that as you will. Does that fit your definition of budget or my definition of budget? A couple other things to point out. He has put these on a bell curve. And I think I asked him in the stream, I said, hey, so what you're saying essentially is every letter is a standard deviation. The math nerds will know what I'm talking about with that. But a standard deviation, I mean, if we're my benchmark for this would be, okay, he has Summons On at D+, and he's got Multi-Shot at B-. That's about 1.5 letter grades, right? Am I mathing that right? All right. Well, my decked out Summons On was only about 2 minutes slower, 10 minutes versus 8 minutes, versus Multi-Shot Zons like in Season 5. So that's the difference in time we're talking. And there's also going to be some weird differences here, like Poison Nova's A-. You want to know what Poison Nova is on Tier 1s? S++++++. It clears them in 2.5 minutes if you have the right gear. So take that in mind too. This is tested on tier 3 maps and tried to standardize over everything. So something that struggles with DPS like Summons On, well, that is I would put that at a C+, because on tier 1s and 2s, it's a lot better. And I think, well, I know Summons On inside now. I can play it a little better, things like that. So keep that in mind. Another thing, as I said, a decked out Summons On. Looks like on most of his streams, he is testing these with like near max gear. This is like end game build stuff. If you notice, when Wappinator and I test things, we do things differently. For example, Poison Strike, which we'll talk about in a minute. I did not run that with a Merc, and I didn't run it with Corruptions, and I didn't run it with Poison Facets. We just test things at mid-level because I want to see what is my daily life going to be like when I got an hour to play after getting off of work, right? I'm not going to get to end game gear. I might not even get to it before I quit. So keep that in mind too. This is high-end testing. This is, I got my Merc decked out. I got my Infinity. I have all my charms. I got a couple Corruptions. I got my Facets. Last. I have not tested nearly this many builds, but there's a couple things that stand out to me on things I did test that I was in disagreement with the community about. And I'll be honest, I am a sensitive little boy, and I don't like getting mean comments when people say I'm doing things wrong. So now I kind of just shut up when I have a controversial opinion. Sometimes. And there were some that I had that I'm seeing him agree with. One of them's right here on Poison Strike. I said I tested that out with no Merc, no Facets, no Corruptions. I heard the Necro guys all saying, not going to do much. Poison Strike's no good. Don't see the point of it. I think I think that's correct, and it's on the bell curve too. So when I see things like that, or summons on, again, probably correctly ranked, right? I said it'd probably be C+, but it is below average on damage. So on tier 3s, I can see it as a D+. Okay, all of a sudden I'm seeing things lined up where I think they should be. Plague Javelin, which I've now sort of ruined because fucking Pool Noodle and DH put out that it was a good class, good starter, good everything. I was gonna play it. Now I think everyone's gonna be playing it because everyone on here is gonna go for A builds only. Fuck, I'm gonna have to play Blade Sentinel now or something. That was the other one. I was picking between Poison Strike as the sleeper, because you have to get the Innocence for the build I want, which is a Zod, so it's not cheap. Blade Sentinel, and then Plague Javelin, and I think I'm gonna switch to Blade Sentinel now. Anyway, the point is, some of the things I'm seeing that were outliers that people weren't picking up on, Plague Javelin, Poison Strike, these are all lining up. Nova's being through the roof, right? Frozen Orb being an A-, yeah. Blizzard, everyone swore to me that Blizzard was better than Frozen Orb. I don't know what they are smoking. And all of a sudden, I'm just looking at these lists, I'm going, this lines up with a lot of the things I thought I knew that I would shut up about because I did not want people to just say, I'm an idiot and you're wrong, and I was like, it's not even worth my time. Blade Dance, again, at an A-. I said that was the best assassin build. I mean, it's literally second best compared to Wake of Fire, which admittedly, I don't play the traps too much. I think this is really accurate, guys. I think this is really, really fucking accurate. I hate to just come out and be like, yep, I'm in favor of tier lists, and I was the guy who was bitching about tier lists a few seasons back, but this is strikingly accurate. And again, top send solo mappings, I mean, he's just ranked them on the bell curve here. And again, why my goddamn Plague Javelin. Take it off, DH! I don't want people finding out about it as I'm doing a video about it. But the only thing I really can't speak on is the Declan Wrathma Killers, and that's again why I was looking at Plague, because I wanted to make one of these. You see why I'm leaning also toward Blade Fury and Blade Sentinel. But again, I've watched those sections 3 times through. Everything's got a reason. Everything's got a reason. And when you got the objective data now where they're putting these on the curves by monsters per minute, you say bell curve to me, and I'm trying not to let my bias slip in, and I'm like, yep, that's accurate. You're putting on a bell curve, it's probably going to be incredibly accurate. So we have talked about the differences with what budget means and how you can navigate that with this list. We've talked kind of about the difference, what I think he means by the difference between the tiers here. Remember, a C build is still dope. A C build is still crushing things. A B+ build is still crushing things, right? We've talked about how I think this is accurate, and there's a couple sleepers here. Poison Strike, guys. Don't sleep on Poison Strike. I'm serious. I think that's just about it. I'll get Wapinator on here and pick his brain about some of these things in a few hours here.
And so it's like, oh, if you have an average, one of which is cows, and it's 25% better than any other map that you could possibly run, then cows is biasing it up, because I don't run half cow maps.
Okay,
compared to there's others where they're the same, where that bias wouldn't be as big, where it's like you look at Nova, they're pretty much the same.
Okay, so I just started when you were talking there. Hang on, I want to share this first, guys. So what we're doing is I put out my 6 minutes with the 5-minute intro to get rid of the idiots, and I'm showing you me and Wapinator's back and forth from Discord. I didn't tell him what I talked about. I just want to see what he agrees with me on and what he doesn't. And that's where we are. So what we're looking at is, like I said, the DH tier list here, and Wapinator is making a point about, I guess, the difference between the maps. So how he's averaging the maps between Blood Moon and something else, right?
Yeah, for most of them, it's Blood Moon and something else. But for several of them, there's not Blood Moon at all, and then there's none where it's only Blood Moon is part of the deal. But the thing is, there's a couple where are we staring at right now? I guess it doesn't really matter which, but if we look at let me see if I can find a good one for my point here. Something like Corpse Explosion, kind kind of the middle of Necro there.
Yeah.
It's 500 for cows, but it's only 420 for Throne of Insanity. And so, as far as those two numbers, so it's like the cows is almost 25% better. And if you're not running cows as half of your maps, just averaging those two isn't quite representative. So it might be that it's slightly worse than what it's showing in the tier list. I'm not saying that. I'm going to bring up a bunch of like nitpicking about Dark Humility's methodology. I don't think any of it really changes anything by more than like a third of a letter grade. It's just, I just want to be a pedant about it somewhat.
Well, I'm trying to remember what I bitched about first. I think the first thing I talked about was, with my tortured analogy, was tier lists in general, that yes, this is sort of not indicative of a set answer. It is a guess based on what the methodology is, but I think DH is taking a step above, and we'll look at the other tier list that I found. This has math. I'm not saying math is a big an instant winner, but where are you on with tier lists in general?
I think generally, and especially now that we do have some numbers to it, and it's not just based on feel, that it is absolutely a viable exercise, and that I'm not ever going to try to claim that something that Dark Humility is showing as a D is actually an A. I think all of it absolutely makes sense in the way that he went about it.
Yeah.
But there's probably, especially not just based on, all sorts of factors, but just based on what you want to play. Remember that even if the fastest build here is Nova, the slowest build is the one that you don't play. It's an argument we always made about farming, where people are like, oh, this is the best place to farm. Well, there's some people that, if they were to try to do 300 Trav runs in a row, they'd kill themselves. So, telling them, oh, Trav is the best, make sure you do Trav, is not useful. The place you'll farm slowest is when you don't farm at all. So just keep that in mind, that only play a build that you actually want to play, and don't just chase speed for speed's sake.
Well, so my tortured analogy, you'll see it obviously when I make the video, was on difference of opinions in geopolitics between like what's going to happen with China. Are they going to collapse, or are they just headed for like massive Japanese-style deflation? Like, both answers are technically correct until one of them is more correct than the other. And the thing I was pointing out was budget. Like, I have a problem, not a problem, it's just a difference of opinion. Like, when DH, I think, is saying budget, what do you think is budget versus when we discuss what is budget is? Like, what's the difference here?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, like, the Sorceress builds, and you see hardly any of them are budget, that's because most of them require an infinity. And that's immediately, your 6 high runes to get your 2 burrs. And okay, well, that means it's not budget. But then it doesn't really have any further discussion about cost anywhere beyond that, where it's like, yes, Summon's on, you can do Uber's day 1, so it gets the 3 check marks, same with Summon Druid. But when you look at 2 single checks next to each other, it doesn't necessarily tell you that to get to this map monsters per minute number that we have that informed the tier, that one of these might cost 30 high runes to get to that number, and one of them might take 60, and you don't really know the difference there. And so that's another part that's not like really captured here.
Well, one of the ones I want to point out was Blade Dance, because I mentioned it, at least, I'm not sure how you feel about it, I guess, is that is one of the most budget starters because it's only 1 high rune to enter. And it shreds in tier 1s and tier 2s with just that 1 high rune. I think he's taking the different approach of budget is Charcy gear. And
it's also the whole center of the tier list, where he's talking about specifically solo mapping, where all of these builds are with, as relatively close to as end game gear as you can get from what was in the open beta. That's how this was kind of presented. And we can have like some sort of theoretical maximum of monsters per minute that you're going to get based on this tier list, but how you approach that maximum, throughout the course of the season is going to change from one build to the next, where you're going to have, an infinity, that's obviously a huge jump as far as how much stuff you can kill in a minute, and and a torch is going to be the same way, but
you can't get over that cost
changes
curve.
from one build to the next.
Yeah. The other thing I was pointing out was I was impressed because I hesitated to say this, but you know this in private. I am not necessarily dealing with the YouTube criticism the way you would think I would. I'm pulling back a bit on some harder opinions because I don't really want people to get screamy at me. It's really annoying. For those of you who don't know, we also I canceled when we were doing our own sort of tier list. We were doing the power rankings just on like fun and safety and all those things. The reason I got canceled was because I put out Fire Arrow. That was about 4 hours from testing to video end, and I realized I was kind of becoming part of the problem.
And it wasn't something that you had really played at the time.
Yeah. So there's a couple opinions I've had, especially this season, that I've kind of kept to myself. I put out the Poison Strike video, and people were like, everyone was like, that's not going to do anything. I see him listing this as A tier here, and I'm kind of in agreement with it. I see Plague listed as A+, I'm in agreement. Frozen Orb, how many seasons have I said I don't understand what people are talking about with Blizzard? Frozen Orb is way better. Like, yeah. I hate to, it's confirmation bias, but I'm looking at this list and I'm going, okay, this is all the shit that I thought. Like, where are you on the actual accuracy in terms of, you know, I know there's the numbers here, but your play testing, your play feel, where do you think this, is it more or less accurate?
I don't see any here that, you know, really jump out at me as this is definitely wrong. And I always try to not have a super strong stance on something I don't know enough about. I do, you know, very much like, you know, the old quote from Socrates of the only thing I know is my own ignorance.
Yeah.
That,
going back to the Greeks.
So that I'm not going to try to go in here and have these huge opinions about where Necromancer could be. Necromancer's the class I play the least, you know, so I'm not going to say anything in there. When I look at some of the things I do play a lot, Wind being a B- and looking at all the stuff around it seems right, you know. That Wind Fury build, you know, that I had played last year seems right. Where Summons On was, and then how I transitioned it to multi-shot last season, feels about right, you know. So I don't really have an issue with any of these really when I you know, kind of watched the video yesterday and scanned through the list.
Sorry, I was clapping because you brought up the exact same metric I did. I said the jump between Summons On to multi-shot looks spot on accurate.
Yeah.
So, we are indeed good friends. We think the same.
Yeah. So I don't really have a problem with any of it. It does seem very reasonable. And as I said earlier, you know, a lot of these builds probably could shift up or down, you know, 1 or 2/3 of a letter grade based on how you play them, how much you like to play them. Something like, you know, Dark Pact, which is an A-. If you're not the type that likes to do teleport, cast, teleport to cast, you know, that kind of very twitchy, kind of APM intensive thing, you're not going to necessarily reach that A- on it. And if it's something that you don't want to play that way, you might only play it as a B or a B-. And so therefore, you know, I also am not going to be super critical about a number or a tier because I kind of see all of these as having slop up or down a couple thirds. Okay.
So we've basically hit pretty... I was hoping there'd be some controversy, but we both basically hit the exact same points here. I'll send you the link for this one. I found... Someone put this in the supporters channel. I don't know who made this.
Okay.
Just take a look at this for a moment here. Something jumped out at me right away.
Strafe summon up at A, yeah.
What?
I mean, well, also remember, this seems to be slightly differently balanced than Dark Humilities is. I mean, you can see just the much higher number of S's.
Yeah,
So, like, and also... another thing that jumped out just as I'm scanning through it, you look at the Sorceress bottom right, S, Ice Barrage, A, S if you really like the skill. What? So, I mean, it's immediately admitting that there is some sort of personal bias within...
And subjectivity to it. Yeah.
And subjectivity to it. So, as well, Poison Strike, Keck W, you know, it's kind of belies, maybe I didn't try it since the updates. Maybe, you know, we're not really giving it its full due.
Yeah,
so,
I don't want to be... we just had said, let's not be super critical of the tier lists here. Because let's be honest, there was some bad ones. Season 3, Season 4, they were getting a little too cow-mappy, right? A little too 5-minute runny. But when I see, like, most of this is right. Like, I agree with it. Okay, Whirlwind Sin. Yeah, I think Whirlwind Sin is, underrated. But when you put Keck W and stuff like that in there, and You put in the subjective opinions, but I'm not sure if this is a joke, but unironically is supposed to be a good tier list, unlike the other tier lists. But then you do jokes like this and have summons on outranked. It's like, I don't know the difference between, are you being serious or are you joking? Like, where does the joke end and where does the seriousness start? Which I know is a weird criticism coming from me, but
yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I've never like put too much weight on tier lists generally as far as this is what you should be doing. As I said, I like to play games the way that I like to play games, and that is the most important part to me, not what is necessarily the best or fastest. I am not enough of a spike that it's going to override me playing the game the way I want to.
Okay. And we can ramble for a bit, but I just want to point out that everybody, the huge, massive change after the open beta, Poison Creeper has been rebalanced.
Yeah, nerfed a little bit. That makes sense. I mean, everyone was just saying like it's so AFK, brain dead that it shouldn't be as good as it was.
I know it should.
Therefore, they nerfed it a little.
I know it should have been rebalanced, but I have not seen more bitching about a fucking worthless nerf or skill since like that was like season 2 Boazon level bullshit over this fucking Poison Creeper.
Yeah.
There you go. It's rebalanced.
What? It also made it so it's like, well, it is so, brain dead that people probably aren't going to want to play it anyway. Because as I said, it's about playing, the game the way that you want to play it, and not just about how do I be the biggest spike and the top of the leaderboards.
Yeah. Well, on DHs, and the other problem is Pool Noodle put out a video too and had Plague Javazon on the top starters. So I just sort of blew the bubble. I was going to play Plague Javazon. I think everyone's going to be on it. I don't know
about everyone.
Dude, when you see that, I know we've probably told everyone, DH has told everyone can say it a million times. Half the player base is not going to touch a build with a C next to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because he had said, well, if they care to look here, once again, there's people that are just going to play what they want to play. And hopefully enough of them have seen and understood that anything with a C is fine. Anything with a B is fine. When it gets down to D and you look at what is a D, and there's not many that are like particularly popular builds to begin with. So I don't think there's a huge amount of stuff that's going to be, or like builds that are going to be underplayed because they have a C here, or builds that people are going to be turned off from because they have the D here, because they weren't going to be played to begin with anyway.
See,
most of the Ds are memes, honestly.
That's a fair point, yeah. It's not like these were super popular builds. I mean, I guess Summons on is a starter, but it's not like people were, rocking charged bolt sorks or anything like that.
Yeah.
Another thing, I know I'm the only, everyone agrees with you that I'm taking the season poll too seriously. I think you're all wrong because I know how polling data works, and that's a representative sample, and you're going to see a margin of error of only like 5% up and down on that. Not total, but in rounding error.
Yeah.
The polling data has actually evened out a whole shit ton. Barb is still way on the bottom. Necro and Sorg really got closer with a lot of the other ones. I'm still one of those dudes. I want to play the thing no one is playing. I'm going to make you make it. You're going to pick for me. I was between Plague Javazon, Poison Strike, and Blade Sentinel. Should I put my money where my mouth is and do fucking Poison Strike and make it good? Or should I go with the two that I wanted to play?
There's always the issue of it's like, oh, you can just do it as a second character, but you're never going to put as much time or effort into a second character as you do the first. I think you should put your money where your mouth is and play Poison Strike. I mean, I think I'm still on Lightning Fury, as I had mentioned in the last video, so I think that's where I'm going to be.
Shit. All right, I'm going to break all my rules and go with the most popular class.
I don't know.
I'm doing it. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove this fucking A tier correct.
Remember, like the biggest thing that it's going to be an issue with is like a torch. But like most of the other stuff does not overlap with all the summons. And I still don't think a lot of people are going to want to play Poison Strike. Some people just want to say it's a Keck W build.
Well, me and you, we're not great players. We're not shit players. We can farm Ubers. I mean, we're not completely brain dead here. We just never put the time into farming the keys like we should. So, all right. Anything else you want to discuss on these tier lists? Because I thought it was going to be a little longer, but you hit all of the same points that I hit, essentially, with almost the exact same examples. So I think we're in agreement on this. Tier lists,
Yeah, I mean,
generally are okay. Take them with a bit of subjectivity. It's not a Bible, but this is pretty good now that it's being put on a curve. And I'm sorry, I think it beats out field tier lists now. I think this is the gold standard. So.
Yeah, I mean, and it has been for a handful of seasons now. There's also some other stuff in here, or in this page, that I also put like barely any weight on. Overall class power ranking. What does it matter to you that Druid is #1 overall if you're just going to be playing Summon Druid? Like,
ooh, I disagree with you. I don't think that's for players. I think that's to give you an idea of where things have shifted. Like, this is what I was talking with Macewan about on the Discord. Like, we need to know that Barb is kind of on the bottom and might need some reworks or some buffs or something because of how it shifts over the seasons. I think that's a pretty useful stat.
Okay, I think that is kind of understandable. I mean, as far as what you should play, I don't think it means that much.
No,
is
no.
more of what I was getting at. Okay. In that, if you really want to check out, Barb Frenzy now that it got some buffs and the bugs of next hit always misses are gone and such like that. Like, you shouldn't let the fact that the Barbarian's at the bottom of that list dissuade you, is my point.
And, all right, so last thing we'll wrap up on then. I have a question for all of you who sat to the very end of what's going to be like a 20-minute video. I have an idea, and I want you to let me know if it works, because I don't think Wapinator had the answer either. If I build an Oradin, native aura, with the Innocence, and put on a Demon Machine, would the multi-shot from the Demon Machine proc get my aura? Because I think you could do a build where you just run around, like the Poison Nova proc build, but you're shooting off multi-shots with like 15k damage. Can some nerd tell me if that's going to work or not before I have to go test it on Pluggy? Because I can't right now because the season's locked.
Yeah. I think it applies to the multi-shot, but I think the aura damage doesn't apply to your Blade Shield. That's what I think is the case. But it wasn't something that we ever had to really know until last season when Blade Shield was suddenly available to everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't care if it applies to the Blade Shield. If it applies to the multi-shot, that's all I need. I just need to figure out if the multi-shot will proc enough for that build to work.
I definitely think it should apply to the multi-shot, just because of how it worked with Bow Oradins before.
All right, well, I have a baby on my lap now, and I got to get going to put him to bed. So thanks for talking with me about this, and I'll get the video out. Thanks for sticking around, guys.
See ya.
All right, little one, let's go.